Good morning, and welcome back to the Global Energy Utilities Forum. I'm Andrew Roscoe, Head of Content for Informa's Energy Division. Thank you for joining us today for the third and final day. You could say we've saved the best till last today. We've got a great panel of speakers lined up for you to kickstart this morning. On the first day, we looked at strategies and policy. We had the event kicked off by the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure from the UAE. We had participation from the Kuwait Ministry of Electricity. We had NEOM involved, and they were talking about the strategies, policies, and models for developing low-carbon energy systems. Yesterday was looking at finance and investments. So how do we turn in these ambitious programs and targets into bankable projects and deliver them with the private sector? We also had a look at the African sector in the afternoon yesterday with a Nigeria focus at the end, and we were looking at how these finance and investments can be diverted into emerging markets where they're needed most. So to start this morning, this third day I should mention, is about some of the technologies and strategies for implementing low-carbon programs and targets. So you can set renewable energy targets, but it's how do you actually get the industries, which are the lifeblood of the economy today, and very important across the region. How do we get decarbonisation into these industries and make sure that we're attracting investment where it's needed, and also setting the trend for the rest of the market to follow. So, as I mentioned, we've got a stellar panel for you this morning. Will be moderated by Brendan Cronin, Director of AFRI Management Consultants. On the panel, we have Alexander Eicherman, Managing Director and Energy Business Director, Wärtsilä. We have Dr. Chet Biliok, Technical Director for New Energy Services at Petrofac. Ali Zerouali, Head of Cooperation and International Development, Mazen, from Morocco. Turki Al-Shehri, Chief Executive Officer, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for ENGIE. Salim Musalem, Executive Director, Decarbonisation Strategy and Partnerships, GE Gas Power, EMEA, and Sergio Lopez Perez, International Relations Senior Specialist at the Department of Energy, Abu Dhabi. So I'd like to welcome you all to the stage, and I'll hand over to you now, Brendan.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. So the topic of this morning's panel is decarbonising industry. And I think when we think about decarbonisation, we often think about power, but the work that we've done on to look at net zero pathways in the UAE and elsewhere, there's a lot of carbon emissions outside the core power sector. So the Middle East is the GCC is very industrialized. There's a lot of aluminium, steel, cement, refining. And there's a lot of emissions associated with those. So we're going to talk in general about decarbonisation, but also try to focus in particular on decarbonising industry, which needs things other than power. I think we're going to talk this morning a bit about hydrogen, perhaps CCS, perhaps other means. And it's very interesting times. As we know, the UAE's announced the net zero initiative, as have Saudi Arabia, and there's an increasing focus on climate change across the region as there is internationally, and obviously I looked yesterday at the commodity prices particularly for gas, which is used to generate power in the Middle East and in many other parts of the world, and I couldn't believe the price of gas. So we're above $50 an MMBTU for the rest of the year, which is about 5 to 6 times what it was just a few months ago, and generating power from gas at that kind of cost is $350 a megawatt hour or more. So when we can generate renewable power in the Middle East for 10 to 15 compared to 350, we can be clear that change is coming. So I'm just going to briefly ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, and the company to represent. So I'll start with Turkey, and then we'll just go down the line.
Thank you, Brendan, and hello, everyone. My name is Turki Al-Shehri. I'm the country CEO for ENGIE in Saudi Arabia. ENGIE is a French energy conglomerate. We operate globally in 70 countries, 170,000 employees, 60 billion euro in revenue. In the region, 32 gigawatts of power. We obviously are an independent power provider, as well as water and pretty much everything across the energy value chain in terms of services.
Hello, my name is Ali Zawali. I'm in charge of international cooperation and international development within the Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy, more known as MAZEN. So in Morocco, we are in charge of developing all the renewable energy strategy in Morocco. And we are also developing projects outside of Morocco, either in terms of technical assistance with partnership with GIFIs or by our own, by investing in a renewable energy project outside Morocco.
Yes, good morning. My name is Alexander Ackerman. I work for a company called Wärtsilä. We're probably about 30 years old in the UAE, but 180 plus years in the market. Our purpose for probably the last 50 years has been to decarbonize the marine and the energy sectors, and basically through engine technology from shifting from higher efficiency to actually going and burn natural gas. So I think I give as a small hint, I think for the last 15 years, we are enabling the shipping industry to switch to LNG, and this is what we believe this is, one of the roadmap that we would like to participate once again.
Good morning, Salim Musallam. I'm the Executive Director for Decarbonization Strategy and Partnership for GE Gas Power. As we all know, power generation is about 40% of the CO2 emission around the world, so we have a huge responsibility to decarbonize, and I'm happy to be here to share some of the activities that we're doing to help achieve the energy transition towards the future of energy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be Dr. Chet Biliok. I am the Technical Director for New Energy Services at Petrofac. Petrofac is an organization that is an EPC, which we engineer and construct energy infrastructure. We've been doing that for over 40 years. We are active throughout the project lifecycle, so engineer, construct, operate and maintain, and also decommission those infrastructure. We have a massive presence in the Middle East. We have a big office out in Sharjah, and about 2 years ago, we decided to look at what we could do in the energy transition, and we then did some strategy work, which then led to us launching our new energy services, which is the area where we use to look at CCUS, hydrogen, waste to value, wind, and emission reduction, helping our existing oil and gas clients to reduce emissions. My role really is to ensure that we have the right technical solutions to support our clients to decarbonize, and I look forward to sharing what we've been doing over the past couple of years with you all this morning.
Yeah, I'm the last one. My name is Sergio Lopez. I'm working in the Department of Energy in Abu Dhabi. I'm former civil servant in the Spanish government, so I have the experience to leave the energy sector from an oil production company or country and an oil-consuming country, so both perspective. And I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So maybe Turkey, I'll start with you, and I think change is coming when Saudi Arabia announces a net zero target, as it did kind of late last year. Be interesting to understand how challenging you think it's going to be to meet that target. Do you think Saudi Arabia can do it? And more generally in the region and the world, how challenging do you think kind of achieving net zero targets is going to be?
So I think I'm fairly optimistic about these targets. There's over 120 countries globally that have set a net carbon zero objective. Saudi obviously being one of them, 2050, 2060, but all within that realm. And I think the reason I'm positive about this objective and being able to meet that is because if you look at this part of the world, it was heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry, and it was a subsidized industry. So it was very cheap fuel, very cheap gas, and as a result, you were getting a lot of inefficiencies in the equipment that was used and the way the processes were done. But now, through price reform, the actual realization of what the true cost of these oils and gases are, you're seeing a lot of opportunities in terms of economic opportunities, whether it's energy efficiency, whether it's renewables, whether it's simply optimizing and integrating the way you do your process. And as a result of that and that push, so you have the policy is there, and that's that net carbon zero objective. The regulations are slowly formulating. You have the companies, the industries, the investors, also with their net carbon objectives. So if you look at the entire, let's say, value chain in terms of public, private regulations, they are all aligning towards this objective. But initially, I believe it's very possible, mainly because it's economic today. However, obviously towards the end, when trying to achieve that net carbon zero objective, it will be far more complex. But in the upcoming 10, 15 years, we're seeing the opportunities today. They're on the ground, they're happening, they make economic sense, both public and private sector. And as a result, I really believe that this objective is achievable, and if not, and possibly even prior to 2050, with the way things are moving forward today.
Turkey. So Ali, I think Morocco is in a slightly different position than Saudi Arabia. It doesn't quite have the oil and gas reserves. We were talking before, you're still importing your gas in the short term, perhaps from Spain, hopefully, perhaps. But I think Morocco also has been changing very quickly. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on how important you think decarbonization is for Morocco.
How can I say? I think that decarbonization for Morocco is both vital today, and it also represents a very huge opportunity for Morocco. Why is it vital? Because Morocco is exporting 70% of our exportations are going to Europe. And we all know that Europe is going to apply a tax carbon from 2023. And this tax carbon will begin by touching several sectors, which are the aluminium, the steel, the glass, and fertilizers. So it represents, and it will represent a huge impact for Moroccan exports if we don't tackle this new fact. So this is why for Morocco it's vital to rapidly shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And it's not only because to gain in terms of energy independency, but as I said, it's also to save a big share of our exportations to Europe. But at the same time, we believe that it's a very huge opportunity because in order to do so, you need to get a lot of renewable energy. You need to have the know-how that helps you to valorize this renewable energy and then to transform it into a competitive advantage. And Morocco has all that because we have developed several projects in renewable energy that are well known around the world now. We always achieved world records in terms of renewable energy price. We have the know-how, so now we believe that we can use and transform this new challenge that is the tax carbon in Europe into an opportunity either to export green electricity, and we already begin to do that, and there are several projects that now are focusing to develop renewable energy to be exported to Europe. The last project is X-Link project, and the objective is to export 10 gigawatts of solar and wind electricity to Great Britain, to UK, and it will represent something like around 7% of UK needs. We are also developing projects around green hydrogen in order to export green hydrogen, but it's also an opportunity for local industries that will use this tremendous amount of renewable energy in order to locate in Morocco industries that will export finished products, greener finished products that will avoid the tax carbon. So yes, for us it's...
This is the carbon border adjustment, so the EU is going to apply their carbon price to your imports from Morocco for power and for...
Yeah, so it's a challenge, but it could be, and it will be a very important opportunity for Morocco to transform our industry and also to transform all our energy mix.
I think, Alexandra, there's been a lot of government announcements of very ambitious targets. But I'd be interested to hear from you what you think. Do you think it could be left to governments, or you think the public, business Is yourselves as Wärtsilä, what role do you think the private sector has to play in all of this?
I think I will take the example as what we've seen in the marine industry. You need the public sectors to obviously be more of interest, right? I think if you look even at the food industry, we all have been, eating different animals before. Today we went and moved to the bio food industry. And if I looked 15 years ago, nobody would have actually go and buy any biofood. Today, this is a common. So it means the public sectors have actually implemented a regulation and demand that forces the industry to switch their models. And I think this is the same what we are looking in the energy sectors. The public sector needs to emphasize their needs and their wish to turn around to a cleaner energies, to a cleaner sectors. And of course, when we look at these equations, it's not as simple as it can sound. I think you need a huge, massive mix of different technology to enabling that challenge that we're all trying to do. So we all know we are integrating renewable today, but we also know the equations to integrate renewable will require my lovely brother next to me there, or us, or different technologies to be able to enabling that performance. Because at the end of the day, we will not pay for bigger, or we will not accept to pay more for electricity. This will not work for us, or this will not work for most of the people. So we need to enabling that transition. So I would say yes, public sector has a role to play. Government, of course, at some point need to implement probably tax regulations. As we have seen in some Europe, we need to see more fund to look towards more infrastructures. Again, looking at the LNG, if you look at the large scale of implementing LNG in the world, large scale projects have been flying very well. Look at the small scale. Still today, they're barely not existing in the small scale in the LNG scale. So how do you support small industry to switch to renewable, for example, to switch to decarbonized solutions? Therefore, you need a little bit of push from both.
Thank you. So Salim, I think some of the work that AFU has been doing has shown that solar is an amazing resource in the Middle East. There can be a lot of decarbonization done through the expansion of solar, but also we've seen that it's highly seasonal, but within the day and across the year, high variable. And I think solar isn't enough, and you need other things. And I think the two hot topics are both hydrogen is a huge topic. Be interested to get your perspective on that, but also kind of CCS. We've been involved in some early work on CCS in the region, and I think our modeling has shown that is also very important. To be interested to hear from you on your perspective and background as GE, how you are thinking about those and what technologies you have in your menu of technologies to provide solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brendan. First of all, I think to your point, it's absolutely true, right? So solar or wind, renewable is going to continue to grow. There's no question about that. I think if you look just 30 years from now, by 2050, as fast as the renewables can grow, you're still going to see gas in the mix. So why we talk about hydrogen and CCS? Because today, for example, GE, we have 7,000 turbines globally. That's 2x times, the entire fleet around the world. And if you don't do something today about it, you're going to be continuing to emit CO2 until the perfect solution comes. So, and Alexander mentioned, when you have renewables, the impact on the grid, you need rotating inertia like the gas power to give it that stability and reliability so that you don't have any brownouts or blackouts. So when you look at power, as I mentioned earlier, 40% of today CO2 emission around the world is coming from power generation. So we cannot ignore that. We have to do something today. So in power plants, there's multiple solutions that can happen to decarbonize or achieve net zero. We call it pre-combustion and post-combustion. Pre-combustion is the type of fuel you use. So you mentioned hydrogen, Brendan. For GE, this is not new. We've been burning hydrogen for about 30 years. We have 100 turbines today globally that are running over 8 million hours on hydrogen.
That pure hydrogen, that's 100% or co-firing?
No, it actually can go up to, we have units running up to 195%. And that's because there was industries that has hydrogen as a byproduct. So the technology is there. Today, with our fleet, existing turbines, they can range anywhere from 5% to 100%, depending on the type of combustor that you have. So from a technology perspective, hydrogen is there, and we can do it. The only issue there is when you look at the energy trilemma, you need sustainability, reliability, and affordability. So until you have the right economy and the infrastructure to support hydrogen, which could take years, we have to look at both pre and post. So post, you mentioned CCS. So carbon capture, we believe, is also very critical in the power industry because this is something you can do today. Carbon capture is not a new technology, it's an existing technology. There's a lot of advancements in the technology happening today. We are participating in the first of its kind project in the UK, the Net Zero Teesside, where we're doing a front-end engineering design study for a new unit as well as carbon capture. So I think policies are going to be important to develop the carbon markets to enhance the CCS. And I think the other thing that's critical is what to do with the CO2, right? I think this region plays a significant role. You know, you're going to have a lot of depleted oil wells that you can use for CO2. As you develop the carbon market and the CO2 offsets, you're going to see a lot more advancements in that. So I think if you look at the overall picture, if we have the right policies and incentives to support, we have solutions today that we can act with speed today and actually start decarbonizing today rather than waiting for the perfect solution in 10, 15 years and still emit CO2 during this time. So.
Alexandra,
Just to add it, and this is the beauty of it, I think you made it very clear. Technology is available today. I don't understand why people are still wondering why is technology not available. Either it's a gas turbine, either it's a diesel engine, either it's energy storage, either solar, wind, they're all available. Our biggest challenge is how do we do the safety around it? If we talk about hydrogen, as you just mentioned, you can't smell it, you can't see it, and it ignites faster than any fuel today that we have on this planet. So we need to look at that structure. This is the most complicated part. It's not about burning it, it's about protecting it so we can use it safely either on the transportations, either on the marine. And I think that's where the challenge will be, is this infrastructure. So yes, LNG is our main, is the first step to move forward. And of course, as soon as we're developing the safety net around these technologies, then we can enabling faster this greener fuel. Sorry for adding that.
I think it's true. No, I think when we look at the cost of producing, say, grey hydrogen today, traditional hydrogen is $1, $2 per kilogram. When I look at the pump price in the UK, there's certain places in the UK are selling hydrogen. It's $15, and the reason is the transportation of that hydrogen to the end user is where the majority of the cost is. So I think transport is very important. So maybe I'm going to keep going down the line, but we don't necessarily have to just keep going down the line. But Chet, be interested to get Petrofac's kind of perspectives and also on decarbonisation, but particularly I know you've been involved in some projects in the UK on CCS and how you think, and what your experience is of that and what lessons there might be for the region in relation to CCS in particular, but your thoughts more generally on decarbonisation would be welcome.
Sure. Just to address Alexander's point, how to do this safely, that's where entities like Petrofac come in. We've been delivering energy infrastructure for decades. This is what we do. This is where we think we can add value to this particular conundrum. So before I answer your question, Brendan, let me take a step back in the sense that if we're looking at decarbonization of industry as a whole, what we're talking about, we have been doing the oil and gas for so long, but when we talk about industry, we're also bringing in steel, cement, aluminium, ceramics, so many other things that need to decarbonize. And when you look at these industries, the sources of emissions are really limited to 4 or 5 emission points. So number one, power. Are they burning fuel for their power? Are they burning fuel for their heat? Are they buying this power or heat? That's number one source of emission. Another source of emission is the feedstock. What are they using their processes? How can they mitigate emissions from that? Something else that is key is the process itself, the manufacturing process, the industrial process. That is another source of emission. How do you reduce emissions from that? Then the other thing that we should focus on, or this industry should need to focus on to decarbonize, is their supply chain. How are they transporting their produced goods? How are they transporting their raw materials? So all of these come into the decarbonization envelope. And when we look, and when we try to address these issues, there are a number of tools which in one of the panelists have mentioned that we can do. So first of all, energy efficiency. I think that's key. Trying to operate more efficiently, we reduce your emissions overall. And doing things like digitalization using AI can also help. Those are low-hanging fruits that we can go for. Another thing that you can do is, again, it's mentioned already, electrification using renewable energy. That is very accessible. That's something that you can do. Middle East here, solar irradiation is great. Solar PV prices, I think prices we're talking about is 1 cent per kilowatt hour now. So very cheap, something that you can implement. Then it gets a bit difficult. How do you then change your feedstocks to be able to decarbonize? So a number of projects Petrofac is working in the UK now is people are looking at waste to fuels. So rather than using the oil in refineries, they are looking at how they can convert municipal waste to fuels. And the technology is there. It just needs to be developed further. Things like gasification, pyrolysis. So those are projects that Petrofac is working on at the moment. Then you see, also, if you are looking at things like fuel switching, then hydrogen comes into play as well. How do you then use hydrogen to generate heat? How do you then use hydrogen to generate power? So I think that has been covered quite detailed. Again, that's something that Petrofac is also very active in. We recently delivered a massive green hydrogen project. The design of that project in Australia, we know where the challenges are, we know where the problems are, we've been able to address those issues. Then I'll talk about the final one, which goes to your question, Brendan, carbon capture and sequestration. That is the final tool that I think is needed for deep decarbonization of industry, because that addresses process heat, it addresses the inherent process emissions, which, for example, cement on its own has CO2 that is emitted while you're producing cement. So you need CCS to capture that. It also addresses power. So using all of these tools, right, to decarbonize is something that we need to do. CCS in particular, Petrofac is very active in the UK. We are part of, we are what you call the project management organization for the ACOM project. The ACOM project is in Scotland. It's called the Scottish CCUS cluster. The UK at the moment is developing a number of clusters, and these are driven by some of the policies and some of the business models that are being developed in the UK to ensure that these things are viable. So just to add to the point that we made, policy is very important, business models very important to move these things forward. So we have all of these tools that we can use, the technology is available, and entities, companies like Petrofac who have the inherent engineering know-how can help deliver these things safely.
So just finally, Sergio, I think, I guess you sit particularly with an Abu Dhabi kind of perspective, and I know Abu Dhabi has a lot of industry. You have Emirates Steel, you have a large aluminium smelter, you have a lot of cement, you have 2 refineries, I think, and ambitions to have more refining in Abu Dhabi. In particular, think about decarbonisation in general, but also kind of industry in particular. How is Abu Dhabi thinking of decarbonising those industrial sectors?
Yeah, it's true. In Abu Dhabi, more or less 55% of greenhouse emissions are coming from stationary combustion, and then we have around 10% coming from road transport, and 2% is coming from manufacturing, 10% coming from iron and steel, and 2% ammonia, 2% aluminium, around 1.5 cement. So industry means around 30% greenhouse gas emissions, pretty similar than the average in the world. So the challenge is huge. And with normally, from a government perspective, from a policymaker's perspective, we identify 5 major challenges when we talk about industry decarbonization. The first challenge is the technological challenge that you have discussed. The good news is that the technology is there. The second challenge is the cost, because decarbonization means an increase in costs. We know that in the future, maybe this cost gap will be reduced, but nowadays, I don't know, producing iron and steel with green hydrogen and renewables will be 20% more expensive than with fossil fuels, or producing plastic 100% more expensive. But the good news is that at the end of the value chain, it only means 1-2% more price in the final product. The third challenge is the social challenge, because normally those industries are located in regions with a huge historic legacy. They are the base of the economic, they are the base of the labor market, and then it means that the decarbonization process should take into consideration the economic performance of the regions and should be a just transition. And there are two other major challenges when we talk about industry decarbonization. One is that when we talk about intense energy industries, the size, the economic of scale is very important. So it means that the transition should be from within the sector. It's hard to understand that there is going to be a new player coming to the commodity markets. So it means that the transition should be done by the incumbents, and mobilize the incumbents is not always easy. That's why we need policy and we need the social support. And the last challenge that I think that is one of the most important ones that explains why decarbonization has been postponed so many years is that industry is global. It's a global sector. Trade makes industry to play in an international field. However, climate change policy are national policies. So if a government is imposing climate change policies in a production, it's affecting the competitiveness of this industry. And it may generate a kind of carbon leakage. That's why in all the regions, industry decarbonization has been postponed. Even in the European Union, where the emission trading scheme has been implemented many years ago, they have always granted industry with free emissions allowances. It's now, with the Green Deal and with a much ambitious climate change targets, when they are talking about introduce these new technologies to decarbonize industries. And the risk of lack or losing competitiveness will be compensated with this carbon border allocation mechanism that Ali refers previously. So the main challenge that I think that businesses are facing now is that depending on the region where they are, they will be part of a region with a kind of carbon tax that may allow you to trade freely between those regions that can be a clean block. And then we will have another kind of dirty block or less clean block without this carbon tax to import there. So how we will manage that, how will businesses manage that is a real challenge for the coming years.
Sergio, so maybe I'll just ask a general question to the panel following on from the points made so far. I think someone said to me recently, and it was a point that really struck me, is that the net zero announcements of the UAE and Saudi Arabia are perhaps the most ambitious of all net zero announcements, because the starting point is so much higher per capita here than it is, say, in Europe. So here in the region, we produce perhaps over 15 tons per capita of carbon, whereas in Europe it's now down to 5 or 6 tons because there's been quite a lot of work done to date. So the starting point for the Middle East, we're starting from we're playing catch up already. And also the other perspective is there is a great ambition to use the low-cost solar and wind that we have in the region to export. I just wonder if anyone wants to pick this up. Is there a tension, or can the region simultaneously meet very ambitious net zero targets and export low carbon products to elsewhere in the world? Turkey, I see you smiling already. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give it a shot. I think it's very evident from the several projects we see with the interconnection between various countries. The GCC is already interconnected, even though the amount is minimal. But having said that, there's still significant internal demand, right? That needs to be consumed. It's not just, there is export potential. Yes, if you're talking about green hydrogen, it's extremely complex. If you're talking about using transmission networks, it's costly. If you're talking about shipping, also added costs there. But one thing you have to recognize is because this is an oil and gas dominated nation and they've been exporting for tens and tens of years, they have that connectivity, they have those markets. And if you guys recall, maybe 2 years ago, Saudi Aramco shipped the first blue ammonia to Japan. And the reason that that was possible is because there's already those trading routes exist. But the question now is just changing those or transitioning from that oil trade to more cleaner, efficient fuels and technologies. I think it's both. Opportunities for internal consumption, enormous opportunities, as well as potential for exports as well.
I don't know whether I know Morocco has great ambition to export to Europe. I don't know if you could comment. It'd be interesting to hear what the current status is of that. And I think you're planning on using, is it going to be piped to Europe, the hydrogen? I assume that's the plan. I mean, Morocco is uniquely placed perhaps to supply Europe with green hydrogen, but you know, how is the export ambitions kind of proceeding in Morocco?
So globally, there will be exports. And I completely agree with what Turkey just said. There are the exports, but there is also the local needs that needs to be addressed. So first, when it comes to exports, Europe has set a target by 2030, which is 80 gigawatts of green hydrogen electrolyzers. Which means they said that 40 gigawatts will be located in Europe and 40 gigawatts outside of Europe. And all the studies that have been led by IEA, IRENA, and World Bank, etc., are showing that Morocco should capture 20% of these 40 gigawatts that should be located outside Europe for the European needs. When it comes to the global market in terms of hydrogen production, it's said that Morocco should capture between 4% and 8% of the market worldwide need in terms of green hydrogen production. So we see that there is a huge opportunity for Morocco to produce green hydrogen and to export it, all the molecules that are derivated from hydrogen, like ammonia and so on. But now, this is what when it comes to exports. But if we have a deeper analysis about the cost, because I believe that all this dynamic around decarbonization will be accelerated if there is an economical advantage and opportunity. So if we have a very short analysis and a breakdown about the cost of green hydrogen, now it's becoming more and more competitive, given the increase of cost of gas for blue hydrogen and for gray hydrogen, etc. So the cost of green hydrogen in Europe is around 7 euros the kilogram. Now, produced in Europe.
And gray or green, Ali? That was gray? Gray or green?
No, green. Yeah, from offshore wind, etc.
Okay. in 7 euros a kilogram. Okay, and that's production.
It's exactly the same as the cost of gray hydrogen today, with the increase of the cost of gas. When you look at the cost of green hydrogen coming from Morocco, for example, at the port of import, if we take, for example, Rotterdam, it will be also 6 to 7 euros. But if you break down this cost, you will see that the cost of the production in Morocco is around 2 euros. And so you have 1/3 that is coming from the production site in Morocco and 2/3 that is coming from the storage and the transport. Because green hydrogen is very difficult to be transported and stored. So we need to convert it into ammonia and then to reconvert it into hydrogen or to blend it with gas in pipelines, etc. So what does it mean? It means that it's very expensive to transport hydrogen, while it's not very expensive to transport finished goods. So we know how to transport steel, we know how to transport aluminium. It doesn't represent more than 5% of the final cost of the finished product. But as I said, green hydrogen, the transport represents the two-thirds. So maybe what we are going to see in the next decades is a reshape of all the value chain, industrial value chain, when big players around steel, glass, ammoniac, fertilizers, etc., will see an opportunity to locate industries in the areas of production of green hydrogen in order to reduce the cost of supply and to gain more advantage, competitive advantage for the financial goods. So this is why there is also an opportunity for the local market to raise industrial opportunities and to develop new industries in countries where these industries weren't existing. So we believe that we can see in the short terms and we see some interest from big industries in Europe that are looking to Morocco now, not just for the supply of green hydrogen, but they are seeking for locations to place or to locate their industries and to source green hydrogen and green electricity directly from Morocco. So maybe there is a change that is coming, and we need to look at this decarbonization not just as an opportunity for exports, but also as an opportunity for developing local content and local industries for countries like mine, like Morocco.
Charlie, I think maybe it's a general question to the panel. I think there's been a lot of talk. We've talked about hydrogen, which I think has been inevitable, and a little bit about CCS. But I don't think there's been quite a few solar projects that have reached financial close. At scale solar projects in the Middle East. We have Al Dafra, we have the Repto projects in Saudi Arabia. But we haven't yet seen an at-scale hydrogen project reach financial close. I know NEOM is trying very hard, and they're looking at doing it this year to get the money committed and to enter construction. I'm just wondering, there's been so much talk about hydrogen and in particular, but also other kind of technologies. But when we move beyond solar, when do we think we're going to, does the panel have any view on when we're going to think, or when are we going to get the first at-scale low-carbon hydrogen project in the region? Anyone have any views on that one?
Maybe I can pitch in a little bit. So just from a hydrogen perspective, there's different colors, right? And I know there's a lot of talk, in the industry about green, but you mentioned UAE and their 2050 ambition. I don't think it's, yes, it's ambitious, but I think there's nothing impossible in this country to be achieved. And one of the things that you can do is put a roadmap to achieve what you want to do in milestones within 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So on hydrogen, I see the UAE playing a big role in blue hydrogen as well. If you want to invest in a carbon capture or a CCS infrastructure and you want to play in the blue hydrogen, you can actually be looking at hitting two birds with one stone, right? Because you're building the infrastructure for carbon capture. So if you're going to do carbon capture in power plants and then you want to use it for the SMR process, the steam methane reforming, to get the blue hydrogen, then you're already investing into the infrastructure for carbon capture, but you're supporting blue hydrogen, which I think this region can be a global center for and starts exporting to Europe and other places. I think Turkey mentioned blue ammonia to Japan as well. So yes, probably you haven't seen financial close, but I think as you look at the different hydrogen projects, regardless, and again, when you look at from the selfish side, if you look at a gas turbine, we don't really care about the color. We'll burn any hydrogen that you can give us, right? But what matters is what makes sense economically, right? You don't want to be burning green hydrogen in a gas turbine, unless you have to, but I think it's better to just use that power, that green power directly from the source. So if you want to use blue hydrogen at a large scale to support gas turbines, I think that's what makes sense economically. And I think, again, if you look at investing in the carbon capture infrastructure and the blue hydrogen, you can quickly see that that will move faster as you continue to develop renewables and green hydrogen.
Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, I think this is spot on. I think there's this phenomenal or this fundamental that we need to change. We have two sources today that we could switch. Gas is already available. So shut down everything that is not linked to, AB fuel, coal, you name it. Switch already to gas. And then, as you said, we do the transitions to a greener fuel. We're sitting in the GCC countries, UAE, Saudis, Oman, you name it. They're sitting with probably or Qatar, sorry. They're sitting with the cheapest gas today on Earth. So for them to create blue hydrogen, it's going to be probably the most competitive fuel you can get. The others will require so much more energy to get to that stage. So they can create the first transitions, the first pass, the first safety net. And then later on, of course, technology will develop, and we will be able to enabling better with electrolysis and others to define, is it hydrogen, ammonia, is it synthetic gas? Do we develop new infrastructure for hydrogen? Do we go one step further with CO2 and get synthetic gas, which then we can use the existing infrastructure that we have and don't spend more money in that part. So I think this is that mechanism that I think it was ADNOC that a few months ago opened. I mean, His Excellency Sultan from ADNOC made it very clear. Energy companies, oil companies will be the key enablers to these transitions. First of all, they have the muscles, they have the money, and they have the first fossil fuel that they can utilize. So I think we need to use that momentum.
Absolutely. And just to add, I mean, if you look, we're talking about decarbonizing industries, and you mentioned ADNOC. I mean, just as an example, so GE, we signed 2 MOUs just in the UAE, one with ADNOC and one with Emirates Global Aluminium. Those are very energy-intensive organizations that wanted to put decarbonization roadmap, and since we supply a lot of the energy and the power solutions for those, we're working already and partnering with them how to advance the decarbonization. So absolutely action is being taken today.
And I would like to...
Let me go to Turkey, and then we can go to Chet.
Just on that subject, on the green hydrogen, I think there's a clear race with respect to green hydrogen. And what I want to highlight about this in specific is I don't see it any different from the renewable, what happened with renewables. At the beginning, it's going to be obviously far more expensive, but that's where the R&D comes in, and that's where the government grants come in. And I can tell you today, when it comes to green hydrogen, there are a lot of many first movers. And the first movers that we're seeing, and it's unfortunate to say, is actually not this region. What we're seeing is Australia, we're seeing Chile, and we're seeing Europe. And the reason that is that there's hundreds of millions of dollars in grants for these specific projects. This is yet to happen here. Yes, there are the projects that we see, the MOUs that are being signed, but without those initial funding mechanisms, no company is going to take that cost on its own shoulder. Yes, it might be a pilot project, something small to test, R&D and so forth, but if you're talking about commercial scale, for that move to take place, you really need a public sector push for that to happen.
Right. So I'll just add to points that have been made. To answer your question, Brendan, to get some of these projects across the line, FID, I'll use 3 things to describe what needs to be done. First of all is, I'll say location, then aggregation, and also cooperation. So when I say location, when you look at hydrogen, whether you go with green or blue, I think it depends on your location. So Australia has been mentioned, Chile has been mentioned. Those areas have very good renewable energy resources that you can generate and green hydrogen quite cheaply. Yes, the supply chain for green hydrogen isn't as strong as blue or gray, but first movers are seeing that if they generate hydrogen in this location, they can do it at competitive prices. Then when you look at blue hydrogen, again, to make the buttress point, areas in the Middle East, the UAE can be first movers, leaders in this area, because the gas is here. The gas is in places like Canada and Qatar and other places. So since gas is there, you need to make use of it. You need to generate your blue hydrogen, and because you have that oil and gas reservoirs, depleted reservoirs, you have the infrastructure, you can also repurpose that for carbon capture. That's location. When I talk about aggregation, First of all, it's quite one thing that we are seeing with hydrogen in particular. The offtake is important. What are you going to do with the hydrogen that you've generated? Some of the things we are seeing in the UK is that, for example, Equinor is developing a massive blue hydrogen project around the Humberside area. They have looked at the industry around that area, and then they have been able to aggregate the demand to generate hydrogen for all of that. That makes the project competitive. It's also similar with CCUS. What you see happening in Europe is that there is a lot of shared infrastructure development. So you are talking about clusters, hubs for CO2 pipelines, for CO2 storage, while individual point sources, individual facilities capture their CO2 and use a shared pipeline. That makes things economic viable, makes it more likely for it to go to FID. And that even goes into the cooperation. How do you get players to aggregate and cooperate to ensure that all of this works together? So that requires a lot of government intervention, government policies that encourages industrial players to be able to work together, that providing the right incentive to ensure that they see the value in cooperation and building this infrastructure together. So working along all of this, looking at the net zero targets, coming up with a strategy that ensures that you address low-hanging fruits first, and then you are able to expand investment to these, will I say, harder, more expensive technologies, will make this work, will make us to be able to decarbonize.
Sergio, I might just come to you, but I'm not sure if this is your point you're going to pick up on, but Turkey's point on incentives and the lack of, there doesn't need to be more incentives in the Middle East. Because I think for us, when we look at economics of carbon or capture and hydrogen, what we miss here is, I feel, is some kind of carbon price is another, that's what we get elsewhere in the world. And I wonder whether, any perspective on whether that needs to be kind of implemented in some form here, and just, it'd be good to comment more generally on Turkey's point on the incentive structure.
Very quickly coming back to the previous question, I think that the question is not when we will have the first commercial facility producing low-carbon hydrogen, is what should be done in order to accelerate having this facility. And as having said, offset is absolutely necessary. We need to have a consumer of this hydrogen. But the other one, as you said, is that we need an increase and a very close cooperation between the public and the commercial sector. Because we are in a very early stage of the innovation chain, and we have to invest in infrastructures, and it's capital that is going to put on risk. So a proportion of this risk should be taken by governments, by the public sector. And the way to do that differs. It depends on the country, on the culture, on the policy-making tradition. Of course, carbon pricing is an option that has been implemented in some regions, but there are other ways to do that. You can invest directly in these projects. You can run this project. You can set mandatory targets. You can approve standards. At the end, all of those mechanisms are mechanisms that the governments, they have to foster and to increase and to guarantee a long-term commitment with those technologies. That is the key point here. In order to move forward minimizing risk, this cooperation is needed. This long-term vision is absolutely necessary. And I think that the way to move forward is just to reduce the risk perception of climate change and climate policy implementations, and reducing this risk perception, it will attract investments in the region.
Thank you, Sergio. I think it's a good point on cooperation and greater, I think public-private cooperation, because I think, I've been in the region maybe 6 years, and compared to Europe, there's a lot, people tend to be a lot more guarded here, slightly less transparent, just more protective of information, and I think that probably has to change if we kind of move forward and need to make a rapid transition. We're kind of close to time. I'll maybe ask one more question. I don't think we have any microphones in the audience, but someone does want to ask a question. So maybe we will have some questions from the audience. There was one here just to start, and then maybe one further back. You might have to speak very loudly for us to hear you, but
there's a
there is microphones, but
There's a microphone right in the middle.
Oh, sorry, there's one here.
You get blurred by the light. I can see it right away.
Okay, so good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. I had a question about hydrogen production. So if we are to use hydrogen for the gas turbines, as Mr. Salem mentioned, it's expensive and maybe economically doesn't make sense to use green hydrogen. But now if we talk about hydrogen, blue hydrogen or steam reforming hydrogen, this will also be expensive because we need to use gas. And that means we will have to take into account the emissions that will be associated with producing the hydrogen. So
I don't know if anyone wants to take that one. I mean, there is, with blue hydrogen, most of the emissions are captured, but not all of the emissions, and it's a big debate about how much methane leakage there is. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that one briefly.
And it's an excellent question. Blue hydrogen, when you talk about it compared to green, it's just less expensive. It is more expensive than gas. And you're absolutely right. But the methane emissions or even the emissions that are produced from the natural gas is something that's being tracked today anyway in the LNG or even utilizing natural gas today. So when you look at the economics, when you look at the solutions, you have to make sure that you're looking at the market, the technology, and the policy. And when you have those three interlinked themes together, so you have the market for it, you have the technology to capture any emissions that come out, and you have the policy to support that so that you can drive either blue or green hydrogen, you can achieve basically what you're looking for.
okay.
And maybe just adding to that, always. I mean, we've done that journey already with solar. Solar was, 5, 6 cents. We are in some regions at 1.5, 2 cents. If we look at the same with the power generations today with gas, we're at 4, 5 cents in these regions. Sure, taking hydrogen today, we're probably at 10 cents. But we need to start somewhere, right? We need to get that journey, and this is the same with solar, same with wind, same with pretty much everything we've done in life. We need to start somewhere, and I think that will drive the volumes, that will drive the price, that will become more affordable for anybody.
Actually, because for our case, we are a gas or LNG producing company and we are offshore. So the options that we're looking at, if we come to look at hydrogen, if we need to produce green hydrogen, it's quite expensive because electrolysis, the process itself, it's quite intensive. And again, utilizing gas or methane to produce hydrogen is also another. So I don't know, maybe the carbon capture would be more attractive than converting to. Okay, thank you.
But you have a point. This is going to be a long journey. There's a lot of analysis needs to be carried on for another few years.
Could I just add one more point to that? Yes, green hydrogen is expensive, yes, granted. But beyond that, we don't even have the supply chain to be able to produce green hydrogen in the quantities that many people are expecting. The manufacturing capacity for electrolysis isn't even there. So if we are serious about the hydrogen economy, if we are going to expand hydrogen production, and if we are going to move quickly, there is no way we are going to produce hydrogen at scale this decade if we don't look at blue hydrogen. That's low carbon hydrogen. There's no way we can do that at scale if we don't look at blue hydrogen. So blue hydrogen is very important. And as you said, carbon capture will have to come into play to do that.
You had a point.
Just very quickly, just to quantify that, the issue on green hydrogen. So you're looking at 3 to 4 times the actual cost. Today, there's a lot of consumption of gray hydrogen that's being consumed today and utilized. If you want green, you're looking at 3 or 4 times the cost. Blue, maybe 2, 3 times the cost. But if you look at estimates, Bloomberg and all these other analysts, the assumption is 2030, 2035 is when green will become economic. Just to clarify.
And maybe it's a false perception because the studies that we have led are showing that gray hydrogen, we are around 1.5 to euros per kilogram. And for green hydrogen, in some locations like Chile, Australia, Morocco, but also Saudi Arabia, we can achieve something like 2 euros or 2.5 euros. So in terms of economics, there is not a very huge gap. And obviously, with the important volumes that are coming very soon, price should decrease more, and we will inverse the things, and green hydrogen could become very competitive. What I agree with a lot is what I think one of the colleagues said. It depends on the location. When you have very cheap gas, maybe it's more natural to go towards natural gas and to have blue hydrogen with carbon capture. When you have a lot of potential in terms of renewable energy, it's more logical to go towards green hydrogen. So it depends. It depends on the locations, but also on the areas of consumptions. Because, as I said, the cost of transport and storage is very expensive, and it could change all the economics about the technologies.
Great. Thank you very much, Ali, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we're just about out of time, so Andrew, you reckon we have time for one last question? There's someone right behind you. Go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for this session first. I'm Adel, coming from Helios Industry. We're developing a green hydrogen project here in Abu Dhabi. Now we're talking about clean and green hydrogen. If we are going for the gas first, that means we'll never achieve the target of zero emission for the governments and so on, because we are going for a clean energy, not a green. So gas at the end will produce some sort of emission. And CCU as well, by the way, will have also that carbon. There is another cost for storing the CO2. So how, by the way, if we don't invest today in the green hydrogen or in the green in general, how we achieve that level?
I don't know if anyone, I can comment briefly and then maybe. So I think you're making reference to the fact that when it's blue hydrogen, you're not removing all of the hydrogen.
Rather than we start building a blue hydrogen from the beginning, we already have an existing now plant. Why we don't install just only the CCUS technology there rather than building something from scratch?
Say that again. So your question is about the emissions associated with blue hydrogen, or about?
No, about the emission itself. Why do we need to start and invest something on the blue hydrogen if we can today have the CCUS technology and implement it on any gray project that's in the market? This is first. Second, if we go for the gas, as you have mentioned, that there is some country, if they have a cheap gas, so we continue producing hydrogen gas, then how we achieve the zero emission for the target of the country? Like, for example, UAE, they're targeting 2050 to achieve zero emission. Gas is not a green, it's a clean, just not green. Yes.
I don't know if anyone wants to comment.
I think, I don't know if it is the answer or not, but it's net carbon zero, right? So it's not zero carbon.
Zero
still be
net carbon, yes.
But you're saying to avoid blue and go straight to green. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's true. Like why, in order for the, I would say, companies to develop, and in order for the technology to develop more, we need even the private and the public sectors to invest on the green, right, on the technology itself. Today, if we're talking about the electrolyzer itself, there is like they need 49 as a kilowatt to produce 1 kilo. But investing more, that will give the technology provider company to produce, I would say, or to manufacture a new electrolyzer that take less kilowatt. That means we decrease the price of the hydrogen production.
So if I may,
please.
You make a good point. The rebuttal to that is there's not one solution that fit all. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you're not going to achieve what you want. So actually today there is investment in green hydrogen. Nobody's stopping it. And it's going to go as fast as the world can do. But if you wait until you have that perfect solution with green hydrogen, you're going to have probably a decade that you're going to continue emitting CO2. And if you don't do anything in CCUS or blue hydrogen, you're going to continue to emit CO2. So what we're trying to say is there's going to be multiple pathways. you invest in green hydrogen, nobody's stopping that, but also invest in other, because it's not going to be one solution and it's going to be different from one customer to one government to one country.
Yep, and yeah, exactly the point, because I made the comment that at the moment, Petrofac, we've delivered a massive green hydrogen project, and I'll tell you right now, the supply chain for electrolyzers and all the other equipment to deliver those projects isn't there. You have projects that are quoting gigawatt of scale. There is no electrolyzer manufacturing to meet that amount of green hydrogen development. So the key point is that over the next decade, we need to do something, and that something is blue hydrogen. It will allow us to start using hydrogen, develop the market before green hydrogen kicks in. And to address your point on the residual emissions of blue hydrogen, there are technologies to address that. There is bioenergy, CCUS, so you grow your plants, you burn them, you capture the CO2, you're actually pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. There is waste to energy, which you have a lot of biogenic content which you burn. If you capture that CO2 as well, you are pulling the CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's why it's a net zero. You use technology to ensure that you are overall achieving net zero at your target, but you still have some residual emissions from somewhere while you are pulling emission out of the atmosphere using technologies like BECCS and direct air capture.
So you say for existing project, we will use the technology, but it's better if we invest in the green hydrogen and energy in the future, for the future. Any project that we have it now, it's better if we use the technology that we have it to capture the CO2.
Exactly.
But we don't invest in a project from scratch, like as a blue, I'm saying.
I'll say we need to invest as well. If we want to, again, it's deployment at scale, right? We need to invest in blue hydrogen even from scratch. Because at the moment, you see a lot of announcements for green hydrogen gigawatt scale. Again, I'll stress, we don't have the manufacturing capacity to deliver those products.
Yes.
So for us to start using hydrogen, for us to start developing a hydrogen economy, we need to develop blue hydrogen as well, brand new projects as well.
Maybe this race between green hydrogen and blue hydrogen is just an industrial race between technologies. Because if we look at the cost of the hydrogen, 30% is coming from the electrolyzer and 70% from the electricity. So maybe we will see more projects with a blending between green electricity and gas turbines in order to lower the cost, because the electrolyzer needs a stable feeding in terms of electricity, and with the intermittency of renewable energy, if you don't increase your capacity factor between wind and solar, you need maybe the electricity from the utility or from gas turbines in order to have this stable supply. So maybe in countries like here in GCC, where the gas is very, very cheap, and there is also a very good potential in terms of solar and wind, we will see a green-blue hydrogen
They call it
with very competitive and even more competitive as only blue hydrogen. So many people are talking about hydrogen, but as you said, there is no financial close yet on a project that is above 20 megawatt. I think that the biggest project in the world is 20 megawatt. In Morocco, we are developing 100 megawatt and another of 250 megawatt, but it's early stage. So we're talking just about projections. And projects should appear around 2027 or 2026. So these are only projections, but from my point of view, we will see more projects based on a mix between blue and green hydrogen.
Could be. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you everyone. I think we're eating well into the coffee break, so thank you all for staying, and thanks to the panelists, and we'll close now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.